Porsche's Taycan, their first ever electric vehicle, is often compared to the Tesla Model S Plaid. They're similar in size, weight, and kind of price. The Model S Plaid is still a lot more affordable than this car right here. But what if I told you, with the power of depreciation, you can get a used 2020 Taycan for the same price as Tesla's latest and greatest Model 3 Performance? Which one would you rather buy? Let's get into this comparison and find out. Now, I was surprised that these two cars go very toe-to-toe in the specs department. The 2020 Taycan 4S, in its most basic trim, has 520 horsepower, which is just a little bit more than this Model 3 Performance's 510 horsepower. But the Model 3 Performance does take the lead in torque. So this one has 740 Newton meters of torque, which is 100 more than the Porsche's 640 Newton meters. So that means this one's just a little more responsive on the 0 to 60s. And that leads me into acceleration times. Given that these two cars have similar power output, do they perform similarly in acceleration? Well, power to weight ratio is everything, and this Porsche Taycan is heavy. It weighs 5,000 pounds, which is basically as much as a BMW X5, a luxury-focused family SUV. In contrast, the Model 3 Performance weighs 4,000 pounds, which is 1,000 pounds lighter than this car right here. And this really does translate to real-life performance. So this Taycan does a 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds, which is crazy fast, don't get me wrong. But Tesla's car does it in 2.9 seconds with a little rollout subtracted. So you might get around 3 seconds. I've actually been able to get high 2.9s on this car. Oh, they caught me sleeping.
60.
Bye-bye.
Quarter mile.
Man, this car is a rush. And for this Taycan, 0 to 60 in 3.8 seconds is crazy. Don't get me wrong. But what's even crazier is a Tesla Model Y Performance, a family-sized crossover, can do it in 3.5 seconds, which is just a little bit faster. I just thought that was a fun fact. Okay, that's just 0 to 60 times. But what about the quarter mile for you speed freaks out there? Well, the Taycan still lags behind a little bit, but it gets closer. So in the quarter mile, this will do it in 11.6 seconds, whereas the Model 3 Performance will do it in just under 11 seconds. I've done an 11:03 on kind of a bad road, and other people have done under 11 seconds in this car.
30. 60.
If you're enjoying this video so far, please consider subscribing. I don't have any sponsors or anything like that, and a subscribe would really help out a small channel like mine. And if you're really feeling for it, feeling a little adventurous, go for that like too. Okay, well that's just going in a straight line, which people say Teslas are one-trick ponies for. So what about cornering performance? I mean, we're talking about a Porsche after all, and they are known for their track performance, and they have that heritage in racing. Well, both of these cars have very surprisingly similar suspension specs. They're both double wishbone suspensions. They both have adaptive dampers. And the Porsche Taycan, in its most base trim, has those two things I mentioned. And you can option on an air suspension system. So you can lower your ride height if you want to zip around the track, or you can raise it if you want to go over a speed bump. But that option will cost you an extra $3,500. And really, it's difficult to quantify how good a car's cornering is, so you really have to take it to the track for that and see if it matches your driving style. I have not taken a Taycan out on the track. I have driven behind one on the track, but I really want to, especially with the refreshed Taycans. Those look pretty sweet. But reading reports online, people love the Taycan for its cornering, and I definitely believe them. This is a track-focused car after all. But what people haven't done is really compare the Taycan to the new Model 3 Performance, which has massively upgraded its handling performance. Okay, I'm gonna take you on a tour of this Taycan, and the first thing I wanna show you are the wheels. These are pretty sweet. Check these wheels out. These ones do not come stock. These are an additional option. There's a lot of options you can get on this car. It gets kind of confusing, but these are some of the best wheels I've seen on an EV, and they don't have the Aero covers, so that'll probably hurt the range a little bit. But I mean, look at that mirror finish. And you have a really large Brembo brake here. I believe it's 6 pistons. So it'll stop you real nice. These are not the carbon ceramics, which are, again, another option that you can get for a lot of money. And I'm a big believer that the vast majority of people do not need carbon ceramics. You really only need it if you're going to the track, and even then, if you're going to the track, like how often are you really going? Unless this is your dedicated track car, just get the steel brakes, save yourself some money. And I'll take you over to the Model 3's wheels now. And you can see I have the Aero covers on these guys. I do want the extra range, and I don't mind the look. These are seriously some of the best Aero covers Tesla has designed so far. The Tesla runs Pirelli P04 tires, and they're actually Tesla specific. And these are, pretty good for the track. They're better than obviously your everyday all-weather tire, but they're generally not considered to be the greatest of track tires. But I'd say it's a pretty good sweet spot for everyday driving. And these are 20-inch rims. So the Porsche, this one at least when it's optioned out, let me show you, has 21-inch rims. But typically in the stock, they come with 19-inch rims. So a little smaller than the Teslas. But these ones are absolutely massive. And I really like this mirror finish on the discs. But now let's talk about range. And that's somewhere the Porsche really does lack in. So this Porsche has EPA estimated range of 227 miles, which really isn't that great. What is a good thing is that Porsches generally, at least from the user forums that I've read, outperform their EPA estimated range, whereas the Teslas generally underperform their EPA estimated range. So this one is rated for 300 miles, this Model 3 Performance. Now it's crazy how many options you could put on the Taycan and just add up your bill more and more. But one option I definitely would recommend is the Performance Plus battery pack. I think that's what they call it. But basically, I think it takes you from 79 kilowatts to 93 kilowatts. And it also increases your horsepower. So you can take this thing from 520 horsepower all the way to 560 horsepower at its peak. And these numbers are actually only in the launch control mode. So when you're not in that mode, it's more like 400, high 400s, I believe. And with the Taycan's range, that kind of leads me to a big question. So like, how viable of a track car is this really? If there's no supercharging or just no charging at the track, this might not be the best option. Let's say you get to the track with 80% battery left. You're already running very low. And then you might get, 1, 2, maybe 3 good sessions in. If it's a long track, probably not 3 sessions before you either need to charge or head home to the nearest supercharger. But really, the small range on this car does limit how long you get to have fun out there. And I would say with the Model 3 Performance, with its 300 miles of range, I was able to get a good 40 to 60 miles of hard driving and still go back to the supercharger, which wasn't at the track. It was I believe 5 to 10 miles away from the racetrack. So very good experience with the range on the Model 3. Now let's talk about charging. This Taycan has 2 ports, one on the left, one on the right. And this could be really good if you own a home and you want to just charge it from either direction. My Tesla, it only has the 1 port on the left side of the car. But that leads me into charging speeds. So this Porsche, it is capable of 270 kilowatts of charging if you're using an 800 volt charger. Now these are extremely hard to find, and if you could even find one, you have to have some really good luck if it's working or not. So realistically, you're probably charging on the 400 volt architecture like the Tesla superchargers. And with these 400 volt chargers, you get a max of 150 kilowatts. And that's if you buy the optional DC converter for this car, which gets you that 150 kilowatts. If you don't have that option, then you're stuck at 50 kilowatts of charging at the Tesla superchargers, for example. I'd say if you're a homeowner, you don't really have to worry about this stuff. You just trickle charge at home and don't have to think about it. But if you're a renter, these charging speeds can be quite a big issue. I mean, 150 kilowatts is pretty good. Assuming you can keep that speed throughout the whole charge session, you're charging from 0 to 100% in just over 30 minutes. but you're definitely not going to get 150 kilowatts. Once you start getting above 20, 30% of the battery's charge, it really starts dropping down, and you're talking well over an hour of charging time to get this to full. And moving on to the back here, the Porsches have this giant LED light bar that goes all the way across the car with their nice logo here spelled out. Maybe Tesla changed their logo to be spelled out to match the Porsches, who knows. And what's pretty interesting is that Porsche actually has this active wing that will lift up at high speeds. You don't actually get to control when you move it up or down, but it'll do it automatically. In comparison, the Tesla has a static carbon fiber rear spoiler, which I think looks really good. And yeah, it doesn't move or anything like that. And check this out. The Porsche has these ultrasonic sensors that they put all around the car for their parking assist, which Tesla removed as they went to the vision-based system. And it's pretty good at object detection. I would say it's not as good as the ultrasonic ones, but that is something that will improve over time. This Porsche has a little extra aero here, some extra winglets right here, and it's got a very nice diffuser. Okay, you know what's kind of interesting? The floor on the Porsche is much flatter than that of the Tesla. So Tesla recently added these fins and tunnels underneath the car to give it a little better aero performance, but this one is totally flat on the bottom. In terms of trunk space in the front, the Tesla Model 3 definitely has a little bit more space. It's certainly wider. You can see all this stuff and junk I have there for filming. And moving over to the Porsche, it's not as wide. It's definitely quite deep. It's actually much deeper than the Model 3. I mean, look at that. I could just stick my whole arm in there. So that's the front trunks, but let's move on to the back now. And both are electronically controlled, so you don't have to put any hands on it. And the Porsche Taycan's trunk is really quite good. And what's really good is they have a 12-volt outlet here. So that my Model 3 does not have, and it is quite useful. And the sub-trunk space is, you know, pretty small on the Taycan. If we head around to the Model 3 here, I can fit a whole fridge inside the sub-trunk, and it goes really deep. So I could just store cold drinks in here. But overall, I would say it's pretty similar. Also, check this out. Metal plate here. So this could help you with scratches if you have careless passengers when they're loading their luggage. Whereas my Model 3 is already getting a little dinged up on this carpet here. It's time to take you on a tour of the interior. Now, clearly, this is a Porsche. So we're talking much more luxury than the Tesla. I mean, look at these seats. Leather, ventilated, heated. So are the Teslas, but you just get that extra level of luxury in this car. And first thing I notice is this heads-up display. Let me show you this one. So yeah, in this interior, you got this beautiful wheel. It's a similar size to the Tesla wheel, maybe a little bit wider. And definitely what stands out to me is this heads-up display. You don't get that on the Tesla, and I really do miss it. It kind of sucks to just have to look at the Tesla screen to see your speed. But what's really interesting about this one is you can customize these gauge clusters. So for example, you can show your speed there. If you press this button, you can choose which gauge you want to change. And for example, I could change this one to be traffic signs, G-force. The G-force one is really cool. So it'll show you, if you start accelerating, this thing will fly backwards. Of course, you're gonna get real turn signals here. Whereas on the Tesla, it's just a button that you press. And they went with the interesting shifter design here. So it's on the front as opposed to, you know, like here on most cars. I think it's fine. It feels quite good to shift, and it's like this cool metal knob. So you get 3 screens here. You get this touchscreen for many of your controls, like climate. You get this navigation screen here, and you could adjust your music, for example, also a touchscreen. And of course your heads-up display, which is a partial touchscreen. You could actually change the lights here. You could hear it. Now this screen is not very responsive, and it's kind of, you have to give it a little force. It uses force feedback, and hopefully you can hear that clicking sound. And down here you could see information. Down here you could change some of the controls about the car, like pop the frunk, or open the rear. And you could also choose to preheat your battery here, which is kind of interesting because the Tesla doesn't actually let you do that. You have to schedule, you have to quite literally put in a location, a supercharger location in the maps feature, and then that will start preheating the battery. But this one, you could just do it right away. You do get 2 cup holders here, and then this front console actually opens with the side button hidden down here. And in here you get your 12-volt outlet, like I mentioned before, and 2 USB-C ports, whereas the Tesla only has 1 USB-C port. That is quite nice, actually. It seems small, but the extra port does really make a difference. And check this out. It's weird I even have to say it, but there's a power push start button on this car for an EV. You know, EVs don't actually need this button. As Tesla has shown, you could just get in the car and drive away immediately. But this definitely feels more like if you're used to a gas car. And obviously Porsche's build quality is quite good, but I will say, after owning the 2024 Model 3 for a while, there are some things that are actually better on the Tesla. Like when I close this door, it's kind of got a rattling plastic sound to it. Hey, Katie.
Hey! Wow!
You know, I'm not going to hold back any punches. I have no loyalty to either of these brands. But yeah, I mean, this one takes the edge in its kind of more real leather feel. Yeah, it just feels very nice and more like a traditional car in here. But I wouldn't say that this car is miles ahead in terms of build quality. Now, this car does not have the knob where you can change the drive mode of the car, like if you want to put it into sport mode, for example. That's something I believe the Taycan Turbo S has, or at least the newer Taycans. So on the base Taycan 4S, it does not have that knob. In these settings, you can of course change your drive mode, you know, from getting long range to normal to sport. We'll just keep on normal. And like I mentioned before, it does have adaptive dampening system, so it can change the stiffness independently of each wheel. And this car does have the optional $3,500 adaptive suspension. So I have this car in low, and let's put it up to its highest setting. Doesn't feel like much of a change, but I'll show you that on the outside. You do get some basic drive assist features, but this car does not have the same level, or it actually just doesn't have self-driving in this one. Some of the newer Porsches do have self-driving, but it's not nearly at the same level as the Teslas. And let's talk about these seats. These seats feel very comfortable. They're a little bit more soft than the ones on the Model 3 Performance, which Tesla recently refreshed with this new bucket seat design that's meant to really strap you in for more spirited driving. But yeah, these ones are very comfortable, really. They don't quite have the same level of side bolstering. It's actually more aggressive on the Model 3 Performance, which is quite interesting, you know, compared to a Porsche. Tesla being a little more track focused, who would have thought? Okay, now here I am in the back seat, and I have way more space in here than on the Model 3 Performance. And one thing that seems small, but makes all the world of a difference, is on the Porsche, the floor is a little lower than that of the Teslas. And this means I could just sit in more of a normal seating position. Whereas if I'm sitting in the Tesla, my knees are kind of just sticking up like this. And the glass roof is really nice on this one. It's one continuous piece of glass. Makes the car feel a little more spacious if you're a claustrophobic person. And you could just stare up here forever. Oh yeah, and one more thing. By default, this Taycan 4S comes with 2 seats in the back. And if you want a middle seat, that's an extra option. And you do have these cup holders here. They're in a really weird spot. So I just put my elbow in here, I guess. But otherwise, I do like the back seats. It's a little bit bigger. You know, there's really no tech back here to keep you busy, but it's just your standard back car interior. Well, that's pretty much it for this comparison. I wanted to focus a little bit more on the Porsche, since I do show you the Tesla Model 3 all the time. And yeah, I really hope you like this video. And this is just a beautiful car. It's got that wow factor that the Teslas don't. Even with the brand new 2024 Model 3 Performance, it doesn't turn people's heads like this car does right here. Please consider subscribing if you enjoy this type of content, and that would really help out this channel. See you for the next one.